we didn't vote to have GDP as our goal. It started out as an econometric measure that wasn't ever intended to be a goal around 1930s or something, right?
That's right. GDP started out as a way, really, I think it was more a way of trying to have a measure of how much of productive activity of the economy could be diverted into the war effort and what would you have left over, and a way of just keeping account of what was going on in the economy. It was never intended as a measure of welfare or benefit or something to be maximized. And indeed, economics itself, if you look at microeconomics, this is where that idea of equating marginal cost with marginal benefit, the whole idea of microeconomics is not for a firm to grow forever. It's to grow to the point at which they're maximizing profits. And when do you maximize profits? You maximize profits when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so you grow up to that point, and then that's sort of what's been called the when to stop rule in microeconomics. You stop growing a micro entity when marginal cost equal marginal benefit. Okay, jump over to macroeconomics now. Oh, where's the when to stop rule? Well, it's not there anymore. So we just keep on adding more and more micro activities, and with no notion or counting of the limits of the total scale of the system. One way I like to say is we don't have anything in economics currently which is analogous to the plimsoll line on a ship. You know, the plimsoll line is a mark on the hull of a ship, and when the water level reaches the plimsoll line, that's the signal that the ship is fully loaded, and you don't go beyond that or for danger of sinking. Well, I mean, we can allocate weight in the boat in the optimal manner. If you put it all in one place, you'll sink the boat faster. And you can distribute among the passengers in all sorts of different ways. So you've got the distribution of the load among passengers. You've got the allocation of the load in different parts of the boat by efficiency. And then you've got the total load limit of the boat, the plimsoll line. Our economy doesn't have any plimsoll line. We talk about allocation among different parts of the boat, different commodities. We talk some about distribution. We ought to deal with that a whole lot more. And we don't talk at all about the total load limit of the scale of the economy. So I think that's a major effort or contribution of ecological economics, is to build that into analysis.
So let me ask you about that. If we were to have a plimsoll line, would that have to be global? Because if, for example, the United States created such a limit and lived within our limits, then other countries would outcompete us, at least economically, though maybe that would no longer be our goal. But does such a governance potential structure, even theoretically, have to be global?
I would say that in maybe, thinking really logically in the long run, yes. But I think if we try to go directly first step global, we won't get anywhere, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think you can do a lot at the local level. You can live within the confines of your national geography and have a plimsoll. You can consider that, what's the carrying capacity of our natural ecosystem within our country, and try to live within that. And then but that does mean you'll have to control international trade. You will not be able to really have free trade with that kind of system. So so I think, and then eventually you might broaden the area to the world. But I don't have any faith whatsoever, after 6 years working in the World Bank, of going to a global control policy of a plimsoll line. I'd be very happy to see us approximated at a national level, and then gradually attempt to influence other nations to do similar things.
I mean, my belief is the boat is going to have leaks and have to go to shore and be rebuilt or things like that. I mean, as you know, when I called you a few weeks ago, I was in DC. What I'm trying to do is work with politicians and future politicians, meaning current staffers and analysts and such, to understand the systemic predicament that we face, to build in a Plimsoll line break glass in case of emergency plans for when there is a crisis, because I just don't see all the things that we need to do now to make our future more sustainable are going to require pain in the near term that no one is going to vote for. So we have to anticipate that en masse as a society, we are not going to keep the carbon in the ground. We're not going to constrain our consumption. As individuals, we can, but as a society, I just don't see that's going to happen. So if you understand that, you know that eventually there will be a crisis, and we want to build in as many possible speed bumps and metaphorical parachutes, et cetera, to prepare for that moment. And I know on your long list, you have a ton of big ideas, one of which overlaps with a big project we're working on. I'd love your input on it. You talk about changing the prices via taxes. And given that we've underpaid for the main input to our economies for the last century, well, just for an example, a barrel of oil does 4.5 years of my work. The average American at $50,000 a year, 4.5 years, that's $200,000 worth of productivity in one sense that you get for $60. So if we were able to put a tax on non-renewable inputs to our economy and remove a tax on labor, which is 95% of what's taxed right now, so that if you make $50,000 a year, you get to keep all 50,000, but a lot of things in your life are substantially more expensive. You might have to do without some things. You might have to repair things and have them last longer. And such a tax would spur innovation tethered to our reality, and it would spur conservation. So what do you think about that? What work have you done on that? And I mean,
well, I think that I agree with you. That's a very important and obvious thing to do. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand the fixation economists and others, politicians, have had on the so-called value-added tax, because what I want to tax.
What is that? What is that, Herman? The value-added tax?
I'll get to it. What you've got two things. You've got the flow of matter and energy through the economy, which we call it, the throughput. Now, that is what we're adding value to. What is it when we add value, what is it you're adding value to? You're adding value to the natural resource, energy and materials going through the economy. What is adding the value? Labor and capital are adding the value to. Now, what is the limiting factor in the long run? Well, back in the old days, in the empty world, the limiting factor used to be labor and capital. We had a whole lot of natural resources, very little limit. That was the limiting factor, and so that's where the nowadays the limiting factor is natural resources, energy, and structured materials. So let's raise the price. Let's tax the limiting factor, raise its price, use it more efficiently, garner our public revenue, which we need in any case from that largely, and let's ease up on taxing value added. Actually, we want to add more value. The more value we can add, the better. So that's almost the definition of efficiency, to add more value to the what's basically scarce. So I would like to, as you outlined, shift the tax burden, the tax base, away from value added and onto that to which value is added, the labor flow. I think that would help.
So that would indirectly help the environment as well, because we would be using less, and therefore there would be less waste. But what would be are there any other wider boundary recommendations that you would have?
Well, as you know, there's this sort of a debate about the carbon tax versus cap and trade sort of things. That I think is a difficult debate, and I personally think that quantitative limits theoretically are better than price limits, taxes. If you limit that quantity, then given a demand curve, you'll determine the price. But demand curves are really not known. You can draw one on the blackboard, but they're shifting all around, and there's errors and omissions. And so, if you fix a price, then a shifting demand curve will result in quantity variations. The ecosystem cares about quantities. The ecosystem doesn't really care about prices. So it's safer ecologically, I think, to fix the quantity and then let the variations and errors and omissions work themselves out in price variations. That would be my preference theoretically. Politically, there's a good argument counter to that, saying, yeah, but that's complicated. You have to set up all these auction systems and so forth. And the carbon tax is much simpler. In fact, all you'd have to do is just change the algebraic sign of the depletion allowance to the oil companies, change that from a subsidy to a tax, and you're almost there. So I could see that being an immediate policy, a first step, something that's easier to do right now. And you can try them both out, but I do think I do prefer limiting quantities and letting the price work itself out, rather than trying to limit or increase the price and think that that's going to control the quantity.